regarding 12 Oaks. That's okay. May we have a roll call for the City Council for the meeting of October 8, 2013 at 3:16 p.m.
Council members: Friedman.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Sinanian.
Here.
Mayor Weaver.
Here. Your report, please.
Agenda for the October 8, 2013 special public meeting of the City Council was posted on Thursday, October 3, 2013 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. First item before you is from the report City Attorney regarding discussion of potential interim zoning measures relative to development of 12 Oaks senior assisted living facilities and other senior housing facilities in the city. One is a motion to note and file a report. 1B is a motion providing direction to staff relative to an urgency interim ordinance.
Thank you. Mr. Ochoa.
Yes, sir. Last month, the council directed that this item be brought back considering the dire set of circumstances that surround the closure of the 12 Oaks retirement community and what the impacts might be on individual residents of that community, as well as the degree of concern and outcry from the surrounding residents. There were a number of suggestions that were offered to the city, but City Council deemed it most appropriate to have City Attorney look at some of those suggestions and contemplate any other tools that were at the city's disposal to weigh into this particular matter. So with that, I would defer to Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. As Mr. Ochoa stated, the one suggestion primarily that was recommended by Assemblymember Gatto was that we look at a interim ordinance under Government Code Section 65858 that would allow the city to restrict or prevent any land uses that might be detrimental or contrary to any proposed zoning changes that we might be looking at, general plan changes we may be looking at. And the point I want to make initially with the interim ordinance, sometimes referred to as a moratorium, is that it is essentially a land use tool to prevent or restrict development while we're studying a particular proposal. And with respect to this property, the first issue that I wanted to address with the council is that, generally speaking, when you look at a moratorium, you're looking at a use or a plan area that you're looking to update your particular zoning code standards. With respect to this particular property, this area, this property is within the North Glendale Community Plan and is zoned for single-family residential, has been zoned for such for some time, and is in an area that is essentially surrounded by single-family development. With respect to impacts that the proposal to close this facility would have, what you have to look at with respect to changing your zoning is whether or not this particular conversion would impact, or the existing zoning doesn't provide for the type of housing or the type of land use that's within that this particular use has. And if you look at the city's housing element, I think there's some information in there which seems to indicate that the city has significant areas in the city zone for senior housing, for senior assisted living facilities. And so, and I'll have to defer a little bit to Mr. Agani if he wants to address the point. But I think staff's assessment, the community development staff's assessment is that the particular need for this type of development tool is not necessary at this time, because although it's certainly unfortunate that this is occurring with respect to these residents, our concern legally is that essentially this is a use that's non-conforming. It was intended to eventually convert once this facility was closed. And legally we do have somewhat of a concern that and a moratorium would really only apply to this particular property, and as such a court might look at it a little bit more askance than it would a typical action of a legislative body to adopt a zoning ordinance. So essentially the point that I would like to get across is that typically you don't adopt a moratorium unless the particular proposal to convert a use from one to the other is contrary to something that you're thinking about doing in the future. And the example I would use is when in 2010 the council did adopt a moratorium with respect to medical marijuana dispensaries, because our law wasn't clear whether or not they were banned. And so we said, let's make sure that none of these can open up while we have the opportunity to look at a ban, and we did that. So essentially, the the moratorium, while it is a tool that can be used to restrict development that's contrary to something we're doing, I think both the community development staff and our office feel that this is not something, this particular use that the property could be put to single-family development is not contrary to anything that current zoning, it's not contrary to anything that staff or the council or the commission were looking at prior to the closure of this facility. So, as we note in the staff report, it's our recommendation that we not proceed with a interim ordinance. And if the council wants to, they could direct our office to prepare that. Again, I think if you want to direct us to do that, we would like some direction on what it is, what type of land uses you would like to preserve, and we'd have to look at whether or not we could apply that to a single property or whether we could look at other properties within the city that it might apply to. So with that, I'll submit to any questions that the council may have.
Mr. Najarian.
Thank you. I understand how a court might look that we're zeroing in on one property, but in actuality, first call for a moratorium came from this dais several months before this 12 Oaks issue even was out there. It was a call for a moratorium so we could study the impact of the growth primarily in downtown, but certainly throughout the entire city. It would be my hope that we could send this back to the Planning Commission with the help of the planning staff to get an accurate assessment of where our zoning standards have put us in terms of what we were anticipating by way of growth, traffic congestion, infrastructure, impact on our parks, and other systems. So if a moratorium is proposed, I think it would be safe to say that this is not the only property. This property is not being singled out for a moratorium. In fact, anyone who's been watching these meetings for the past several months clearly is aware of my position that we need to stop, take a breather, assess where we're at. And so with regard to that one issue, you raised several issues. I just want to put out that the one issue that we may be charged with singling out the 12 Oaks property, I think would fall by the wayside because there's certainly sufficient evidence in the record, video and minutes that indicate this is an issue that has bubbled up to the surface. It hasn't gotten very far yet, but it had bubbled to the surface for many different projects, but with the general theme of taking a pause, assessing where we are with our growth in Glendale as compared to our zoning standards and the impact that it has on our quality of life, infrastructure, traffic, et cetera.
Can I ask you a question, Mr. Najarian?
Yes.
So I hadn't heard you talk about a moratorium on single-family houses, which is what this lot's zoned for. So are you suggesting a moratorium on single-family residences as well? So just basically, and commercial, just no more building in the city?
Actually, if anyone's been in downtown Glendale, and actually throughout, I think they would be shocked at the incredible amount of growth which is going on and is still...
Talk about single-family. This is zoned single-family. So you're saying no more single-family houses either? I'm just trying to clarify what you're saying. You'd like a moratorium on single-family houses as well as multifamily? Is that what you're asking for? Because this lot's zoned single-family, and I hadn't heard you mention that in the past as a concern.
Right. I'm not sure how many lots are actually in this project. I think that any development would include a lot split, but I think what we do need to do is pause.
So you're saying single-family as well?
This proposed development is going to have a huge impact on the community, and I think we owe it to the community to pause, hit the pause button, and see where we are in this growth and throughout.
Okay, so you're saying you'd like a more... I'm just trying to clarify what you're advocating for. This is the first time I've heard you say that you would like a moratorium on single-family development. So that's what you're advocating. I'd like to know, if we're going to vote on this, what you're advocating. So you're saying you don't want any more single-family houses built in Glendale at this point. You'd like a moratorium on single-family houses.
I haven't formulated the language yet to be put into a motion. I would be happy to work on that with the city attorney's office if we want to bring it back next week for an emergency basis.
I guess I still don't understand, but let me ask the city attorney a few questions. So it sounds like a moratorium is, I mean, that's pretty severe to say that to stop this from being developed, we have to stop all projects in Glendale from being developed. You can't, or maybe you could single this one out, but it's difficult because it's zoned like everything else, single-family zoning. We'd basically have to say there's something different about this, or we'd have to say no more single-family houses being built.
You'd have to
But
look
let
at-
me
right.
ask this. This is my question. What about a temporary restraining order for the evictions that are going on? Because to me, there's two issues. One is what's going to happen to the site at some point, but the bigger issue right now is that you have a really vulnerable population being evicted with almost no notice, with no place to go. And I understand you say that our housing element has senior housing in it, but I know from talking to people who have family members at 12 Oaks that they are not moving them within Glendale, that some of these people are being moved 50 miles away where their family can't see them. So is it possible to get a temporary restraining order against any further evictions until we know that this population, isn't there something that protects this population from being moved away from their community?
Councilmember Friedman, in order to, and I assume you're asking whether the city could get an injunction.
The city or the residents?
And the city, it would be difficult. I don't know that we would have standing or we would have a basis. We would need a code provision that's being violated, some standard that we have control over, and that we're saying they're not going forward. And as far as I know, there's nothing of that ilk that we could rely on. I've heard there are circumstances related to the transfer of this property from one entity to the B group, that certain promises were made, and that would be a private matter for the Charity League and the current owner of the property. There might be some options there. I've heard things floating out there, but as far as the city, I don't see anything right now that we would be able to go
Well, could
into
the residents or their families get a temporary restraining order from these evictions?
I'm a little hesitant to say something public because I'm not entitled to give advice in public. I think they would have let me put it this way, they would have a better shot than we would for sure. But I don't know what kind of chance that is.
But we could try, right? We could go to the court and we could ask for a temporary restraining order.
Well, a couple of things. One is we couldn't do that today because that wasn't on our agenda for you to give us direction to do that. And two, I really don't, as if I'm sitting here today, know of a basis for us to do that. And I can't recommend you give me direction to do something when I really have no legal basis to do it. And it's unfortunate. We looked at this trying to figure out if there was a way that this can be put on hold. But again, even if we were to adopt a moratorium, that doesn't prevent B Group from closing it. That's
my concern, that even if we do a moratorium and say we're not going to allow building on this site, that doesn't necessarily stop the evictions. And right now, that's my primary concern. I mean, there is another concern about what happens to the site, and that is a concern.
Right.
But for today, my concern is that you've got residents. Do we know how many have been evicted and how many are still in the process of being evicted?
We don't know how many. I don't think any have been evicted. At least I have not heard that. A couple dozen have relocated, but there's still a considerable number of people there on site, is my understanding.
And keep in mind
Right now, those people are my concern.
Right. I mean, keep in mind the 60-day notice I think goes effective November 1st, so they couldn't actually evict anybody at least until then. And
Is there any protection for senior citizens that are being evicted from their residences and only being offered housing outside of their community? I can't imagine that there's no protection from that happening.
It might be an opportunity. Maybe there's somebody in the audience that can speak to. I do know, for example, with respect to if this was not a senior assisted living facility that provides a commercial service as part of their arrangement, if it was just an apartment project, then they would be subject to our just cause eviction ordinance. But our ordinance is written in such a way it excludes these types of, because it has a commercial component to it, it's not covered by them. There's also a state law that requires them to send this notice in the first place and to provide them relocation opportunities and to work with them. And my understanding is they are working with them. Obviously, reasonable people are differing on whether or not the level of service they're providing is adequate service. But I know they are doing everything that they're supposed to be doing in terms of the eyes of the law.
And does the owner of this property, the current owner, have the ability to sell this property?
No.
I'm hearing that he doesn't.
It's an open question, and I don't know. I don't have the documents, and I've heard both stories. I'm sure we all have. That one, there was a promise was made that it would be restricted to this particular use when it was transferred. But I've also heard, even from the people from the Charity League, that there's nothing written into the documents, no covenant that prevents this type of transaction. And again, that's not something that the city would have standing to challenge.
Okay, and you just said that it was agendized a certain way, so we can't talk about restraining orders, but I'm the one who agendized this. I asked for this to be agendized, and what I asked was for us to be able to explore all of our options in terms of keeping people from being evicted and what happens to the property. So I don't understand why we can't talk about any option that could be on the table about preventing evictions.
If I misunderstood the intent of the request, then I apologize, because we were the ones who put the agenda item together. I thought it was to discuss the suggestion about the interim moratorium. And we can,
No, because I didn't make a suggestion about a moratorium.
Right.
I made it, and I agendized this. I asked for it to be agendized, and I asked for us to discuss.
I seconded it, and I also assumed it would be a wider universe.
And again, obviously, if we wanted to hear comments, we're free to hear that. You can't take action on it. I wouldn't have put, and to be honest, even if I had made it a broader agenda description, I wouldn't have put a restraining order on there as one of the options, because I don't think it's a viable option at this time. So certainly, if you want to have a discussion about just the impacts of the closure of 12 Oaks, I think that's fair game, because the discussion of 12 Oaks is on here, and I think we can have that discussion.
Okay.
I'm just saying you can't take action on an
That's
injunction.
That's fair.
Najarian.
I'll yield to Mr. Quintero, because
can I
I've
just-
spoken once.
Can I just briefly
follow.
address comment, Councilmember Najarian, and it has to do with just the broader moratorium, and I think we've probably discussed this a little bit in the past, that under the government code section that allows cities to adopt these interim ordinances, to the extent that they preclude or prevent the development of multifamily housing, the city council would have to make additional findings, which are much harder to make, I would say probably almost impossible, that the development of the particular projects are a harm to public health and safety, and there's a very clear standard that it has to violate some city policy regarding public safety. The findings are much more difficult to make than they would for development of commercial uses, single-family uses. The legislature wrote that into the law a couple years ago to prevent the use of these interim ordinances on multifamily housing unless very specific, higher findings could be made with respect to those types of land uses.
Mr. Quintero.
Okay, I have a quick question. I assume the DBE, or whatever the name of the successor to California Presbyterian Homes, that is a nonprofit, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, look, I'm appalled. I mean, I just find it hard to believe this nonprofit, the successor to Presbyterian Homes, which did projects here in Glendale, all over Southern California and probably beyond, I can't believe what they're doing. I just find it beyond comprehension that they would move so quickly, and I can't help but wonder, have they looked for someone to step in their shoes, to buy that property, to manage that property? They may not even want to sell it, but some management contract with another company. I'm not sure that they have, but it'd be interesting to know whether they did or they didn't, because the quickest way for them to make a buck is obviously to sell it and sell it to a single-family home developer. But I hope the Charity League pursues all of its options, because it hasn't been that many years, as far as I know, that the Charity League turned this over to what was at that time Presbyterian Homes, and for them to turn around, evict the residents, and then sell the property. It seems to me they need to pursue that avenue. I would like to have it come back next week to see what else we can do to try to help the current, what are obviously senior residents. But I do think legally it's next to impossible for us to put together any moratorium that's going to stand up. And while we are continuing the moratorium or enacting the moratorium, it doesn't mean that they can't continue to get rid, and that's the best term to use. They can't continue to get rid of the residents. So this is a very difficult position we're put in. And when I say we, I mean the community. That obviously there have to be lots of those residents who have roots here in Glendale and have children and grandchildren and so forth, and all of a sudden, in a very quick period of time, they're being forced to vacate the premises.
Mr. Sinanian.
I'm also very concerned about the speed with which they've moved forward. And in fact, apparently, just month or 2 months before they gave the 60-day notice, they were signing contracts with residents. So why would they do that? I mean, all these questions that are unanswered. However, I also don't see how, in terms of legal means, we can, enter this process and do something. I would also caution against looking at things like moratoriums or temporary restraining orders, because, again, like Councilman Quintero said, that doesn't necessarily mean they'll stop. And in fact, I don't want to create, false hope with the residents that somehow the city's coming in and there's going to be a result, especially given the fact that the city attorney is in fact saying that he doesn't believe we have standing, can prevail legally. So again, I think the league should move against them as a matter of private cause of action, whatever that cause of action may be, and take all measures to prevent this from happening.
Mr. Najarian.
I'll yield to the mayor, if the mayor.
No, I want to do the public speakers before I do.
Let me just make a point then. Well, I think we're all serious about this, all in the council, and so let's take this a notch up. It's my understanding the National Security League gifted this property to the BE Group with the specific proviso that it be used for senior housing. So what we have is a transfer with a representation by the buyer that this is what it's going to be. We now have a situation where the buyer has reneged on that, and we do have the ability as a municipal organization to go after this BE Group for fraud, in my opinion, if the transfer was made with the specific intent that it be dedicated, whether it was in the deed or not. I don't think that precludes you from investigating this as real estate fraud. And we've had all sorts of real estate fraud in Glendale from various types, and I've discussed some of that also in my endeavors to purchase a home. But I think it's something we should definitely look into and get down, at least open a criminal investigation as to what the representations were when the property was transferred to the BE Group. Now, there might be statute of frauds involved, but let's not worry about that. But let's get down and see what it was. Because are you following me a little bit? If this, and I'm not sure if there was any consideration at all, other than the fact it was going to be maintained in perpetuity as a senior residence home. Now they've reneged on that, and they're cashing in to obtain money for that. I think that's a problem, and I think we should put BE Group on notice that we're going to investigate that. And whether it's a county investigation or a city investigation, I think we should put them on notice. I don't know if they're here in the audience now, but let's get down to that. And that may give rise to an injunction to prevent any further activity on evicting the tenants there if we can show there's an ongoing case and get a TRO issued by the judge in the criminal court to stop it from happening.
Now, that's a suggestion. If we could
Mr.
do that,
Friedman.
I would support. I agree. It sounds like there's something really not right and fishy with this, and we have criminal investigation in the city, not through your office, but maybe through the police department or...
Typically, it's the district attorney that would look at that. So if you want to have us, we can go back and obviously look at how that process would work and then bring it back to you. If you want to come back,
So could we ask for a temporary restraining order then if we were asking for a criminal investigation?
No.
So who would have to request that?
In that case, it would have to be the district attorney if they have the...
But we could ask the district attorney to issue a
Certainly.
temporary restraining order against the evictions.
Certainly, and I'd like to look and see whether that would be something that they would take on. What would be the process? Whether there are any other remedies the city might have, for example, unfair business practice under the Business and Professions Code. The first I'm hearing about it in terms of the suggestion, so we'd have to look at it and think about it just a little bit, and then come back to you next week and see what can be done. So if the council, wants to just suggest, we'll take all the ideas and we'll just come back next week with what the potential remedies might be. Again,
I'm all for that. I agree.
Before I go to public, I just reminded everybody on the dais, if you wish to speak, you go through the chair, not by the chair. Okay, the first speaker, 2 minutes each, Grant Michaels and Rose Chen. Grant Michaels? See if 2 minutes fits you, okay?
Good afternoon. I'm the president of the Montrose Verdugo City Spar Heights Neighborhood Association. In the past 2 weeks, I've led 2 community meetings on 12 Oaks, and there is considerable interest and concern about this issue. In hearing the comments today, I was invited to lunch last week by some of the residents at the dining hall. Normally, the dining hall is filled with 50 to 60 residents. Last week, it was about 10. I expect this week it would be less than 5 as most people are moving out. The community understands that the facility is closing. There's not much that we can do about that. The restraining orders at this point may come too late. Even if there are a handful, 5 or 3 member residents who are still there, it would be challenging to ask them to stay and lose their friends, lose the community that is there to support them. Our concern is not, yes, we are concerned about the evictions, the speed at which it had happened, the fact that a buyer was already in place for the property when the evictions were noticed. Those are concerns. But we're more concerned with what will happen into the future. There's a strong desire within the community that 12 Oaks remain a facility dedicated to seniors. The property was originally deeded in the 1930s by a donation. That supersedes the current zoning that was established. The zoning as it stands, it is a legal non-conforming use. To question the zoning, there is a question of, was the zoning put in place and did it accommodate use as a retirement facility? I don't know that. There are many more questions to the legal title, the transfer. Assemblyman Gatto's office has requested that the State Attorney General be involved. I ask to have the council explore all options. Thank you.
I'm sure we would.
Dave, I have
Mr.
a question.
Quintero.
I have a question. So in the 1930s, I was aware of the original transfer, but when was what year was the property transferred from the Charity League to either California Presbyterian or DB?
In my understanding, that happened 10 years ago. And prior to that, the 1930s, the Sunshine Society was formed to handle the property at some date, probably in the 1950s, I believe. The 12 Oaks Lodge Foundation was created. That is still the legal entity that owns the property right now, and that's still intact.
Okay. Thank you. Next speaker, Rose Chan.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Rose Chan, and I am president of National Charity League Glendale. And I am here to speak on behalf of any alternative that can slow this thing down. With respect to National Charity League, I want you to know, I can't speak openly about what we're doing, but I want you to know that we are considering all options. We're looking at the original trust. We're looking at what happened 10 years ago. But the hard thing, as Ms. Friedman says, is we need time. So any kind of ordinance or anything that can be or TRO that can slow this down so that the community and the city and the residents and NCL Glendale can look at what everyone's respective rights are would very much help. I was actually there just this afternoon for lunch with the residents, and there are 15 in the dining room. I don't have an exact count. Some of them actually are so sad about what's happening they won't leave their rooms. So each time we go, it truly is heartbreaking. But I know that you are mostly here to focus on land use issues, so I did want to make a couple points that are less emotional maybe and just more practical in terms of what the community needs. First of all, I'm not sure what went into the previous examination of the need for senior housing, but again, from what I've seen, and I've had a very steep learning curve trying to figure out what is going on with senior housing in the community since the announcement was made on August 21st. But from what I've seen, there is a very critical need in the community, at least for affordable senior housing. and many of the residents still have not found homes, or the homes that they've found are nothing comparable to what they've had at 12 Oaks. You know, I'm
Go on.
sorry, now my
No,
time's
go
up.
on, go on, finish up.
And so I would urge you to look at that again. It does seem to me as even when they were offered homes at other B group homes, they found those options actually foreclosed to them, or they were asked to move or invited to move to La Jolla, and meaning leaving their families, their community of friends, their doctors, you know, everything. And remember, most of these people are in their 90s. And so many of them are so disoriented about what is happening to them right now. And really all, you know, we have been able to do is continue to provide the companionship while we work behind the scenes, trying to see what it is we can do. Secondly, I do think, you know, with respect to the zoning, 12 Oaks has been there at 2820 Sycamore Avenue for 80 years. And I don't know when the R1 zoning came in, but probably not back then. And I believe that the value of 12 Oaks to the community far exceeds the $4.1 million asking price that they have put on this property. If you haven't been there, it really is a very unique place to be. I think a lot of people in the neighborhood thought that they literally could be wheeled down the street. It's filled with oak trees and sycamore trees, and every unit, while not luxurious at all, is very homey, and you step outside your door and you see the outside. It's not institutional, it's not a hospital, so in that respect it looks very, very different from maybe what other B group homes and other retirement homes look like, but it serves a very unique purpose. I also want to assure you that if you walked around, it would confirm there's nothing unsafe about the property as it stands. It's very well maintained. Everything is ramped. You never have to climb up a set of stairs to get to your unit. Finally, from what we know, we met regularly before all this happened with the director of 12 Oaks Lodge. We would meet every month during the academic year, and all the recent operating statements through February of 2013 do not show a home in financial trouble. And I have in my notes, in my minutes, that he said the only thing causing it to go in the red was the allocation to 12 Oaks Lodge of the rebranding cost that B Group had initiated a couple years before.
Better finish up first.
And then I've heard it said that this is a quite private matter, but others have already brought up that this property is actually not currently directly owned by Southern California Presbyterian Homes. It is owned by 12 Oaks Foundation, which is the same entity it's been in since 1937 when they founded the Verdugo Hill Sunshine Society. And so we believe that the original trust purpose should still continue to govern, and that I believe that the trustees of the 12 Oaks Foundation Board need to remember that they have a duty to that entity and not just to the B Group. But, and as it's been referred to here, 10 years ago, we gave custody of the foundation to the B Group. Their trustees, their appointed people stepped up and are the current trustees of SEPH. And we would ask them to think about whether they have really thought about the interests of 12 Oaks Lodge versus the interests of SEPH. And to confirm this also, there was no exchange of money. There was no sale. We asked them to step up because at that time, and I think it's still, they have a very reputable, they're a very reputable operator of senior homes. And in our view, it was our job to find people who would best manage and maintain 12 Oaks into the future. And we felt that we were not necessarily the best group to do that. But so always, you know, we had no interest in the value of the property. People have asked me, why didn't you take it? Because we knew that's not why it was entrusted to us. And I believe it was clear similarly, otherwise why would we hand over this valuable property to them, that the purpose of that whole exchange was for them to maintain the home as a home for senior residents, an affordable home for senior residents.
Ms. Friedman has a question for
I
you.
have a quick question for you and then a question for the mayor. My question for you is this affordable housing currently? It's affordable senior housing?
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's not cheap. It's not free.
I mean,
but
is it subsidized by the state or anybody? That's a-
Gabrielle? I think it's us. We have a benevolence fund that we have donated to it's been our main philanthropy since even before we had custody in the 1950s and 60s.
Okay, so you
So
subsidize
we
it. So that's-
subsidize it. B Group may raise money for that too.
Thank you.
But
Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much.
thank you.
Ms. Snanian.
Since it appears that I think the city attorney is worried about, and I'm worried also about us having no privity of contract, no relationship with B Group. Why isn't the league filing for a TRO as opposed to the city being asked to do that? Because you appear to have at least more of a relationship with them.
I think we just want to do things right. So, as I said, we are
Okay.
considering all options, and we're working against time. Yes, we have definitely, everything's on the plate, on our plate in terms of what we're trying to do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Friedman?
I wanted to know if there's anyone from B Group here.
No, I had 2 speaker cards.
But I know, is there anyone from B Group here who's willing to speak? Okay, then my question for staff is another alternative. Is it possible for our housing authority to purchase this as one of our affordable senior housing projects? Is that something we can look into?
I could ask Peter Zovak to,
Well, I saw Peter sitting back there and it popped into my head.
I'll defer to Peter in terms of what the economic impact is. I don't know that our cash reserves are such that we could do that.
Well, and what if, instead of market, what if they can't sell it and they do have to do another transfer or have another operator? Is it something that we could step in and operate?
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, that question was asked to me by the city manager a few minutes ago when I stepped up to the dais on the side. My initial response is no, we have no ability to utilize affordable housing funds in an assisted living type of arrangement. We've not done any type of project like that in the past. I believe it is prohibited, but I've asked staff and our outside Affordable Housing Council to take a look at that question, and hopefully we'll be able to come back at a later time with a definite answer on it.
Okay, I'd love to hear that answer. When you
I should say that all of the affordable senior housing projects that we've participated with SCPH on are all HUD 202 independent living projects. And in those particular projects, once a tenant is unable to be independent, then they no longer qualify for those types of projects.
okay? Well, let me tell you how little I know about this. I've lived here all my life. All of a sudden, I get an email about 12 Oaks and the problems that are creeping up, and I said, where the heck is 12 Oaks? Never heard of it. I got on the internet, Googled up a map of it, and I said, oh my gosh, don't tell me somebody is trying to buy that. Try to rip out oak trees and sycamores, whatever, and develop it, because that's what I sincerely believe they're going to do. I don't want to buy it to take care of senior citizens. They want to look for a profit. Nice spot there. Look, if we cut all these trees out, just look what we could do here. Now, they would have to deal with the city of Glendale to try to do that. They'd be, I would say their odds are very poor at doing that. When I initially found out, I asked about it. All I was told, there's federal and state laws that prevent any resident from being relocated without their express permission to a facility that they will be willing to go to within distance and the quality of that place. When I sit here now and hear how many supposedly moved, I'm wondering what advice I was given about the federal and state laws. I don't know what the law says, and everything I'm hearing from my colleagues, especially the attorneys, this is a real legal matter. I don't know how anybody can be evicted or be willing to move without what the federal and the state laws say. They're probably not getting legal advice. I don't know who is supposed to be giving the legal advice and telling them their rights. I think that's a travesty. So I figure sooner or later this will be settled in a court of law. Maybe after everybody is out of there, unfortunately, which is too bad because government, the court systems moves pretty slow sometimes. So I believe it'll be the courts that will decide the outcome, not you or me. But at the same time, well, I have great empathy for the people there. I mean, I have a 93-year-old mother-in-law who's in ICU for 2 weeks now, might not make it, 93. I understand, appreciate it. But I don't see where we can do here. I'm not supporting any moratorium in this city. We tried that a couple of times, and it just won't work. No moratorium. You're not going to be able to justify putting a moratorium on everything in the city and have the courts believe that it wasn't targeted for this specific reason. I think somehow we've got to get to the remainder of the people there, or the ones hiding in their rooms, some legal advice. And I don't know who we have to talk to get that kind of legal advice to them. Mr. Garcia, do you know?
Mr. Mayor, my understanding is they are working with counsel. They are also working with Bethsedec, which is a nonprofit legal firm. So my understanding, they are working with counsel, and Ms. Chan's responses made me believe that they are working with counsel.
There you have it. It's the legal arm that's going to determine it, and if they're working with them. Again, I still don't know why a single person moved out. I'd sure like to talk to him and say, did you want to move here? Is this close enough to where your relatives live? Do you like the facilities? And see if they answer yes to all those. And if they say no, I'd like to ask them, then why did you move? I bet you say, well, we thought we had to. No legal advice. It's sad. And maybe if this all shakes out and they can't, those people can move back when they get their proper rights adjusted in a court of law. Because I will never sit here and as long as I'm sitting here and vote for any development, redevelopment that area, tearing down anything. Because this is all a profit-motivated exchange of land use to a company that wants to make money. There's too much human greed in this world as it is. When you start doing it to senior citizens like this, it's unconscionable.
Mr. Mayor?
So, Mr. Friedman.
Going off of Mr. Najarian's suggestion, can we rezone this property so that it can only be senior housing?
We'd have some concerns with that, obviously, given this location in the neighborhood that it's in. We could look at it. In the past, I've seen single-use zone properties, but it's pretty unique. You really have to have some findings indicating why you're treating that property differently than other properties in the surrounding neighborhood. And I'm sure Mr. Ghani's getting up, so he's got planning-related issues.
Well, given that it's being used for that now, doesn't it seem like at least you're not...
I think the problem that you would end up finding out is that...
One at a time.
Well, is that you, particularly with comments that have been made even here in this particular hearing, that the owner of that property might have an argument that that decision has a material impact on the value of their property vis-a-vis the use. And so to the extent that we are spot zoning a particular property for a purpose that can't be supported by the findings, we have to give that very serious consideration.
Doesn't that the property was given to them for free for that use, doesn't that become a finding?
That is not at all.
Mr. Ghani.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That is not an issue that would be in any way relevant to the zoning. And let me just answer the question. Even if we could find a legal way to rezone the property, that would not in any way prevent the 12 Oaks to be closed or transferred to somebody else or be transferred into multifamily senior housing of other sorts. Zoning is not the answer to this issue, and it would not resolve it even if we could find a legal way to get there.
But any project there, Mr. Ghani, would end up at the city council for approval.
If there was going to be a new project consistent with today's zoning, which is single-family home, it would be subject to a subdivision to single-family home lots, which would likely end up here.
And what if it was going to be a tear down and multifamily built? We wouldn't see it?
If it was going, well, no multifamily would be allowed to replace that.
Okay, it could only be single.
Both the building and the use are existing non-conforming. They're not
Okay,
conforming
so
to
it could be single family, but more single family units.
That would be single, well,
Whatever the zoning would allow.
whatever the zoning
Whatever the
allows.
zoning allow,
But they would have to, for example, do
Subdivision map.
a tree study to make sure that the oak trees were being preserved, that there was consistency with the surrounding area and the existing North Community Plan. But it could not be because of the circumstances by which the property owner retained the property or acquired that property, or how we feel about what they did to the residents, or how we feel about is somebody making too much money on a deal. That has nothing to do with that particular.
and that's why I believe the applicant, or not the purchaser of this property has not done their homework and realizes they're not going to make a big windfall by kicking these old people out. Just what do they expect to do with it? If theoretically they were losing money, and that's been contradicted, that they weren't losing money, I don't know the value to them to start this mess. They're not making any friends. What do they expect to do with it?
Well,
But it's
we
a
have-
private civil matter, so really there's no way for us to know that particular.
I know, I'm just looking at what, talk about no multifamily, single family only within the density or whatever of the area, that's it.
But, well, in addition to that, the confines that the city manager just outlined, because this is not a raw land out of anywhere. It's in the middle of a community, and it's a mature piece of property that has mature trees on it. All of the regulations that we have for every single-family residential development would apply from the get-go before the start to the entire subdivision if there was supposed to be one.
I'd like to see them put more houses in there outside the drip lines of those oak trees. There won't be any room. Ms. Friedman,
Well,
then Mr. Quintero.
first, let me say that I think it's very telling that B Group didn't send a representative. They were notified of this hearing, I assume, because this involves their property.
Microphone.
My understanding is that they were aware of this particular item. They have tried to reach out to us. We have tried to schedule a meeting with them, albeit unsuccessfully.
Well, I think that someone from B Group should have been here. They were aware of this meeting. We're talking about their property. They should have been here to explain their actions to the community and to the council. And I don't think it speaks well of them that they didn't bother to send a representative here. I would have liked to hear from them and to hear their side of this. That's the first thing. And secondly, if you were looking for direction, I was going to say, I think you have it in terms of us investigating possible real estate fraud, other types of fraud, and anything we can do to assist the Charity League, I think we should do. I know that they have their own counsel, but let's offer to assist them in any way that we can with whatever they need in terms of materials.
And right back where I said it, it's in the legal arms. Mr. Quintero.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question. I assumed that BE Group is a nonprofit and stepped in the shoes. In other words, Presbyterian Homes changed their name, certainly not behaving like a nonprofit. I have a general question, Mr. Agani, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm just curious in terms of the potential value of this property. How many homes, you have some feel, ballpark figure for how many homes could possibly be built on this site?
Based on the R1 zoning, there could be anywhere, again, depending on the constraints of the properties, could be anywhere between 20 to 30 lots.
Additional?
So even with the sycamores and the oak trees?
Well, no, because I prefaced by saying without knowing
Right.
that, we would definitely ask for a complete analysis of the vegetation and the flora on the property, and based on that, we would make recommendations onto the subdivision to preserve the indigenous trees and vegetation to the extent possible, and based on that, we could reduce the number of lots significantly
Yeah,
from
when you
what's
drive-
allowed in the code.
Right, when you drive by there, I mean, there's no question it's heavily wooded, forested, so the idea that you're going to be able to just put up these tract homes willy-nilly, that's not going to ultimately work for whatever
And that
developer.
would not meet any of our other standards either, because we don't only have the tree preservation standards, we have all sorts of other standards that would kick in, and based on those, we always reserve the right to reduce the number from what the code allows.
And I just went through another such lot with sycamores and oaks on them. They had to do a complete report, everything. Man, they got problems. The drip line kills a lot.
Mr. Mayor, can I just make one clarification?
Yes.
To something that was offered a couple of times now. To the extent that the National Charity League is very much aware of the resources that are available to them, up to and including Glendale PD and District Attorney's Office, rather than the city initiating any kind of investigation, simply talk with Charity League, and if they want to pursue that, allow them to pursue that, so it's not the city of Glendale directing.
So you're asking for a city to step totally out of it?
Yes, sir, at the end of the day.
We have the Charity League here.
And so they've heard the council's discussion, know your passion on this particular matter, and I think if they feel that's appropriate, they would pursue it.
So the Charity League should do the legal arm investigation.
If
The
they feel that
city's
that's
staying.
appropriate, they may have looked at that and
I think
decided.
they may be looking at just a straight, legal challenge to the way, the method of the transfers. But I don't know. I mean, we just.
All that background and heritage, I don't know.
They've got the best standing out of anybody in the.
You'd have to read all the documents and understand legally transfers and sales and whatever. The Charity League was listening, right, Ms. Chan? She's got it. She's taking notes. Okay, if there's nothing else, there is a motion to note and file the report.
I believe we're returning to you next week with some additional discussion.
So there's a motion providing direction to staff relative to, that's the urgency interim
I think we
ordinance.
had your clear direction, and so
We'll
I
just
could
come
think
back
the
next week.
appropriate, either would be to either to continue item or just receive and file this particular report.
Right.
Note and file, and you've got direction
Yes, sir.
to come back.
All right, I'll move.
Move 1A, is there a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Council members: Friedman,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Harrow,
Yes.
Sinanian,
Yes.
Mayor Weaver.
Aye. Thank you very much. Staying for the lengthy discussion. We'll now move on to 2.
Item 2 is Director of Community Development regarding proposed mixed-use project containing 532 live-work units, 532 live-work units with 2 residential lobbies, paseos, and a bank to be located at 201 West Lexington Drive and 418 North Central Avenue. 2A is a motion approving Stage 1 design review subject to comments and conditions of approval.
Mr. Ochoa.
Yes, sir. We have for you a rather exciting proposition, albeit one that is very ambitious. The existing Citibank block, as it's been termed, is before you for a potential and proposed development that would encompass the entire block potentially. So with that, Roger Kiesel, our planner, will be presenting you a staff report as well as bringing forward the development team.
Great. Good afternoon, Mayor Weaver, members of the City Council. The immediate real estate group is requesting Stage 1 design approval for the proposed, what they're calling City Live Work Community. The project is located on approximately 138,600 square foot site, bounded by Milford Street to the north, Orange Street to the east, Lexington Drive to the south, and Central Avenue to the west. Currently, the site contains a parking garage and a 2-story commercial building on the northern portion. Those 2 structures will be demolished as part of the project. Additionally, on the southeast corner of the site, there's a 6-story office building that's proposed to be maintained as part of the project. The project will contain 535 live-work units and approximately 4,200 square feet of commercial space in 4 buildings. The existing live-work building will be converted, the existing office building will be converted to live-work units and given a facelift. That building is in the southeast corner of the site. The Citibank retail branch will move from the existing building on the northwest corner of the site to a new building on the southwest corner of the site. There's a drive-through on the site now, and a new drive-through is proposed in relatively the same area that it is currently located. Where the parking garage and the bank building are now, two new buildings are proposed on the street corners, the Milford Central and Milford Orange street corners. There are proposed residential lobbies, and then the remainder of those buildings will be the live-work units. There are 904 parking spaces proposed on grade and within 3 levels of subterranean garage. And as proposed, the site will be bisected by a north-south and an east-west paseos, I should say. And there's also a large court sort of in the north-central part of the project. The project is eligible for a story height bonus to increase the height to 8 stories, and an FAR bonus to increase the FAR to 4.29. And the applicants are allowed to do this. They're offering almost 44,000 square feet of publicly accessible open space in the form of the paseos and the courts. And this is just over 6 times the minimum amount that they are required to provide. So they're providing significantly more publicly accessible open space than required. Staff has worked closely with the development team and is recommending approval of Stage 1 design for the project with the conditions contained in the design memo. At this point, I would like to turn it over to the applicant team for their presentation.
Just one quick. That was 44,000 square feet?
Almost 44,000.
So an acre?
Just
43,560.
Right.
Okay, thank you. First speaker, Rodney Kahn. Okay, how much time does the team need?
Mayor Weaver, we need about 15 minutes to present this project.
Okay, as a team?
Yes,
if
that's
you use
correct.
it all, he or whoever else gets none. Got that?
That's correct. That's why
Okay.
I speak first.
Start the clock.
Good afternoon, Mayor Weaver, City Council, and City staff. My name is Rodney Kahn, and I am part of the Amity Real Estate Development team. Today, we're introducing a new innovative concept to the City of Glendale. A live-work campus that will be located in the heart of our city. This live-work campus will be ideal for business-minded professionals to live at, to work at, and to play at in our city center. Our vision for this site is the same vision that you, the City Council, had when you adopted the Downtown Specific Plan. And that is to apply good urban planning principles so that we would attract excellent working, living, shopping, and entertainment opportunities all within a short walking distance. This project achieves those goals. We began this project by master planning this city block. A series of paseos and courtyards were incorporated into the overall project that would actually invite the public into our campus. As mentioned by staff, we're proposing over 1 acre of publicly accessible, usable open space, in addition to which we have private and common open space in the form of roof decks, plazas, courtyards, water features, outdoor seating, which total is about 113,000 square feet, which is a truly, truly significant amount all paid for with private money. I've been asked, what exactly is a live-work unit? And what is the benefit of having a live-work campus in the heart of our city? A live-work unit is generally defined as a unit where the proprietor can both conduct work activity and reside at within the same unit. We often think of the turn-of-the-century live-work units, which is where a shopkeeper had their business on the ground floor and their residence above it. This concept has evolved over the years to where we are today. Today, a live-work unit has become an incubator space, a space for a small business to start up and to grow. It reduces the use of vehicles for commuting, and in this project, actually encourages pedestrian activity, bicycle use, shared car parking, and our project will provide shuttle services for its occupants and the visitors. So in short, basically reducing traffic congestion in our downtown area. Live-work units also provide an affordable housing option for small businesses. They do not have to pay for separate office spaces and separate residences. This campus will create a 24-hour downtown. All of these things highlighted in our downtown specific plan and carried out in our project. It is time to bring back to our community jobs, the right kind of jobs. This live-work campus will offer a place for business professionals, for entrepreneurs, and for startup businesses, a campus-type environment so that they will be successful, they will grow, and they will contribute to our city. I'd like to conclude my remarks and invite our architect, Bijan, to walk you through our conceptual plans. Thank you very much.
John? Name for the record, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, City Council member, City staff. My name is Bijan Armanpour, the architect for the project, and I'm going to walk you through the project. As it said, this project engages, one city block, and the site planning that we have come up with, keeping, with the urban scale of the downtown high-rise area, as you see it on the east, over here, stepping down gradually here in this gesture, and then going down to a 6-story building and blending in with the residential area to the west. The buildings are varying from 8-story to 6-story. Right here, building D, which is the 8th-story, the tallest building that we have, and then building C, which is 7-story, and building B, which is a 6th-story. The existing building here is labeled as building A, which is converted to live-work units. Actually, we're maintaining the building and adaptively reusing this building for live-work units. Now let's take a closer look at the public open spaces that we've created in this proposed project. Central Avenue on the west and Orange Street on the east are connected with this paseo with lush landscape, and then Lexington Drive to the south and Milford Street to the north are connected with this other intersecting paseo going through this large central court. The water features and the landscape here invite and guide people, the pedestrian traffic, into the space and the courts, within the project, to be integrated with the live-work occupants' activities right over here. There are two images here on the right that delineate the entrance from Central Avenue into the Paseo, and then further down as they walk along, getting close to this enhanced area, this court, and then leading to the other parts of the open space. All these open spaces are dedicated for public use, and they're about, as I said, it's about 44, about 1 acre in area. This is an enlarged portion of Orange Paseo right here to the left of this image, and then Lexington Paseo right over here. And these are examples of the features that we've used. The water features, the stepping water features over here and here on Lexington invite people again to this central court right over here, and it is enhanced, the experience is enhanced with this high waterfall feature to just give the feeling of a park-like experience. This is the main central court, the largest public open space that is being provided, and it's about 18,000 square feet in total. And these are some examples of the features going into this area. Like this, there is another high waterfall here at this far end of the courtyard. And then the lawn areas, the mound areas, and the seating areas, the entertainment areas that is next to the cafe and public spaces that are provided in the main lobby of the building right over here. This courtyard from the south connects to the Lexington Street, and from the north through this wide opening connects to Milford. There's also right over here at the entrance of the building the bike rack. These are the short-term bike racks that are being provided, and the long-term bike racks and parking are provided in the garage level. In addition to all of those public open spaces, we have common open spaces for the occupants of this campus, and they are on three of the buildings in three different locations, and we have created different themes for these open spaces. Right over here is actually the swimming pool, the gym, and all the activities that goes on here. We have another one, another rooftop over here, and then this one looking north and west. This one shows the south active roof garden that we have here with the gym, exercise room, and all the other activities, similar activities right over here, and the landscape, the large landscape areas. The other roof over here, which is the smallest roof that we have, open space, is at the north side of the existing building and at the south side of the tallest building, but this portion of the building is 7-story, and this is a quieter, we've called it, a passive roof garden for those who want to relax and, if you will, meditate. Then the other open space, the largest open space right over here, which is about 10,000 square feet, and allows the occupants to enjoy the expansive views to the north and to the west into the forested hills. Now, look at the building. We are using a very high quality concrete, all concrete, reinforced concrete building, which allows for more opening and more flexible areas in the building. And that's how we have created in all of this openness. The light architectural aesthetic of the building are all due to this type of construction. We're also in full compliance with California, Cal Green, State of California sustainability standards and regulations. This project will be designed to conform completely with those standards. Here, there are 4 corners on this campus, on this site. As we see here, this is the corner of Central and Lexington, and each corner has its own importance and uniqueness. Right over here in this corner where Citibank branch will be moved. It's been treated with a different look than the rest of the buildings as we go along through these renderings. These full height glass will be a blue color to represent their blue color used in their logo, and it is the main commercial corner of the site. This one, the northwest central Milford corner, which faces, this portion of the building faces Milford Street, which has, a dog leg, if I may, configuration. And the importance of this corner is being enhanced by using colored full glass and providing a second lobby for the entrance of the building. Again, the lightness of the structure and the concrete, the construction type has been utilized here to create all the features here. This one is at corner of Milford and Orange. This corner, again, has its own importance and uniqueness by having the main entry lobby right over here, again with a colored full-height glass and the glass enclosure at the corner of the building for the units, for the live-work units above it. And then the last corner, which is Lexington at Orange, we are improving the aesthetic looks, the architectural features of the existing building photograph here on top by using full-height, again, full-height colored glass over the existing building, which is next to the Lexington Paseo. Lexington Paseo entrance is actually in this area between the two buildings. And this is the corner building where the bank, the Citibank, will be housed. And this concludes my presentation. Thank you. And I would ask Mr. Greg Astorian to continue with the presentation, please.
Mr. Astorian, name for the record.
My name is Greg Astorian, Mr. Mayor. I'm with Remax Tri-City, that is part of the team with Amity Group, and as far as the representation with Amity Group is concerned. Let me just get acclimated with this. Perhaps go to the next slide. So just a brief overview of the community brands that Amity Group has created in the past decade or so in the United States. The first one is Plug and Play Tech Center, which is located in Sunnyvale in the heart of the Silicon Valley. This is an incubator for approximately somewhere around 250 or so tech-oriented and startups that really work through there and, of course, then grow throughout afterwards. It's interesting to note, Mr. Mayor and the members of City Council, that IBM just did a study that shows 90% of the content on Internet was created in the last 2 years. That's 90%. That includes everything, whether it's Facebook, Twitter's, your emails, and so forth. Big chunk of that has to do with what is known in the industry as digital entertainment.
Did you oh, that was a 15 minutes. Okay. How much more time do you need?
I need at least 3 more minutes.
Okay, that'll take it to 18. Already, and we'll see what's left.
Thank you very much. And so digital entertainment is going to be the future economy as far as the entertainment business is concerned. Interesting, DreamWorks knows about it. Disney is working at it. Most big studios are trying to position themselves to be able to profit from it. This live-work community that we are proposing in the city of Glendale is going to incorporate that kind of a economy, basically, that kind of entrepreneurs in our campus. The second one is Hollywood Production. We're mostly aware and are aware of Hollywood Production name. 2 of them exist in the city of Glendale, and they basically serve the entertainment industry and post-production companies. Perhaps the most prolific and the most important one of these 3 communities is the 1010 Live Work community in city of Los Angeles. composed of about 227 units, came online in the middle of the recession, the most severe recession that we had in the United States. It went to full occupancy within 6 months. And that's the kind of model that we have in mind for the campus that we are proposing in the city of Glendale. I'd like to, for a moment, touch base on the last slide that I have for you, and that has to do with the job creation factor of this thing. I'm not going to get too technical as far as the economics is concerned, but I will say this. If you look on the upper corner, you see a figure of 7.16. That's called the multiplier effect. In other words, for every basic job that we create in this city, it creates 7 additional jobs within our economy. And the kind of jobs that we are referring to here, which is the most coveted jobs that economists really like, is called the basic employment. And we feel that we have the opportunity to bring a lot of it in the city of Glendale through this live work entertainment-based campus. Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, if you were to Google the word karma with a K and building together, what you will see are names like PayPal, Google, Logitech, and a slew of other names that got their first seed money, their first start, from and occupied buildings with Amity Group in Palo Alto. It is this kind of firepower, excitement, and creativity that we are hoping to be able to bring in, so long as it applies to the entertainment industry and the business and the service industry in the city of Glendale, which would be really the first live work campus that we are bringing into the city. We respectfully ask for your approval, and our team is ready to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quintero.
I want to see that slide that had the names of the different companies.
Sure.
That one.
These are some of the companies that we service through our the 3 communities that we have, whether it be Hollywood Production that has done, for example, shows like Fear Factor, Burn Notice, and so forth, MTV Style, and CBS and NBC. They've all been clients. Of course, with the names like Danger and PayPal, these are names more so connected with the technology sector and so forth.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I want one more card. Aram Kazazian. Three minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Aram Kazazian. I came over here to tell you that this is the type of design I like to see, even though I think we're overbuilding, but this is not like the piece of garbage of Maryland right there in front of everybody's faces. What I'm concerned about, Maryland, it has a jog in there, and this is our opportunity at this time to realign that. If we go back and widen Maryland's very narrow street in front of McDonald's.
Milford.
Milford, yes, Milford, sorry. Milford. If we widen that, Milford could be realigned. This is your only opportunity you have. Please consider that. It's a very important factor in this building with all this traffic coming out. You're going to be dumping it on those streets, a lot of cars, and this is a chance you have to straighten that up. And another thing is the bank parking. I analyzed the bank parking only has 11 spaces. I went down Citibank and see how many employees they have. They have about 8 employees that at all times. 8 employees, they all drive. That means 8 cars are going to be taken by the bank parking. So then you have 2 handicap spaces. That allows only 1 per customer. If we don't allow the employees to park and park in neighborhood streets, now you are creating another uncomfort zone for all the other homeowners, which now they have to pay $25 a year to be able to park in front of the homes because Now the city is going to charge for the parking permits $25. So you are creating a hardship on the people that don't have money. But now the setbacks are, I analyze the setbacks that this is much better than other buildings is done, but the street on Milford is very, very critical. Please see what you can do. Also, I noticed on the traffic has asked for a bus stop location on Central, which is another important factor, so you will not be slowing the traffic down in that area. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have no more cards. Any comments, questions? Mr. Kateri.
Okay, I'll go first. All right, well, let me start by saying that we're not doing this in a vacuum, that we didn't just willy-nilly decide 2 years ago or a year ago that we were going to allow this type of, not this project, but just a housing in general here in the city of Glendale. We went through years and years of meetings and decision-making, et cetera. And so what we decided on as a city council was that we would downzone the multifamily neighborhoods in this city. We would downzone the multifamily neighborhoods in this city. So let me be real clear. If perhaps you could build 12 units on a particular lot, we took it down to maybe 8 units. If you could build 7 units, we took it down to 5. We did that throughout the city, from the southern portion all the way to the north. We downzoned all of the multifamily neighborhoods. And by the way, we also, in a sense, downzoned the single-family neighborhoods, building smaller homes and so forth. It took years to do this. And, incidentally, we also got the approval of the state of California, because you do have to meet certain goals in housing. You can't just arbitrarily downzone your city and expect to comply with the state laws. And so what we decided to do, not only as a council, but what we decided to do as a city, because we certainly had enough public input, we decided to build in the downtown, to allow building and to allow single occupancy type of apartments, condominiums, etc. And we also decided to go with the live-work type of concept. Well, we haven't really had any live-work projects yet, and this is the first one. This is the first live-work project in this city where all of the units are dedicated to live-work, not just ground level, but throughout the unit, throughout the campus in this case. And in this particular instance, I think this company has done a tremendous job of providing not only a great, quite a few amenities, and I'm going to have some questions in a minute, quite a few amenities to the people that live there, but more specifically to the public. We're talking about 1 acre of open space, and it's not open space for the people that live there, it's open space for everyone. You've seen these corridors. They're not narrow little corridors. They're huge corridors for people to sit, for people to wander, not only from this particular development, but also from some of the other towers, because I do envision that some of the other towers near this location, they're going to wind up going there, maybe even going to a restaurant located on this campus, or bringing their food from somewhere else. So I think this is a beautiful design. I'm very happy that this company has chosen to continue to invest in Glendale. They've hit 2 home runs in this city with their projects. If you go to those 2 locations, one on Broadway, the other one on Brand, Hollywood Production Centers are called. If you go to those 2 locations, what you see is a very young demographics. You see people who are either starting their own business or perhaps have had a business for a while and moved there to have the kind of networking that takes place. And in fact, I think this is going to be even better because they're going to be much newer and nicer buildings, and people have the opportunity to live there. So you think to yourself, well, live there, what does that mean? You're working, you're living. Well, that's the new economy. It's not anything that's being invented here in Glendale. It's something that's taking place across North America as well as Europe and other areas, I'm sure. But all in all, I'm just very pleased, and I can't help but think to myself that had they gone to Burbank, had they gone to Long Beach, had they gone to, obviously, San Francisco or Culver City or Santa Monica, had they gone anywhere else, Pasadena, in this Southern California area or throughout California, what kind of response would they get from the people on the dais? I think it'd be a very positive response. Because of people, well, first of all, the amount of money that's being put into this project and the kind of spin-off that the people that live in this project is going to generate. I think it's just a fantastic shot in the arm for the downtown, and I'm very much hopeful that it'll be supported today and we can move forward. I think that was a good idea on Milford. I think we have to address with the traffic engineer, we have to address how we can work with Milford to make it a little bit easier. But I also have questions about some of the amenities, and specifically bikes, the rental cars, any possible shuttles, what's being done to transport some of these people around either the downtown or the general area.
Thank you. Next. Anybody?
Isn't that a question?
I'd like to get an answer.
No, there's a question.
Okay, go ahead. Sir.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Quintero, as it relates to the shuttle service, we offer 3 different shuttle buses, and those buses operate throughout the day in the morning from about 8 a.m. to goes to about 10 p.m. And what that does is that encompasses about a 3-mile radius from our site, and that's used by occupants and their visitors to our facility. And so we would have on staff shuttle drivers with those shuttle buses that are available all that time for the occupants and the visitors.
And we can put that in the agreement, is that correct, Mr. City Attorney? We can make that a requirement?
Of the design condition? Yeah, any design condition.
That's what I thought.
That was one part of the question. The next one you asked was related to the bicycles. Obviously, as you know, the code requires us to have both short-term bicycle parking and long-term bicycle parking, which we will fulfill. What we're also looking at, which is a little bit different, is also to incorporate shared bicycles as well. So people will be able to use them, take them throughout the downtown area, park them, and share them as a result of that. That's another component or piece of it. And then the last piece, as you mentioned, relates to, in terms of the shared car parking. We're going to have, it's often referred to as zip cars. That's just one company that does that, but we will be incorporating shared car parking as part of our overall project. I think it's either 4 or 5 spaces that will be kept at all time for our occupants for this campus.
Okay, who's next? Want me to speak? Okay, I'll go ahead and give mine. This is concept. I understand the word concept. The use, projected use of it, live, work, yes, I fully support that. I think it's about time we had one in this area, downtown. And it's going to be interesting to see the different players that will be coming in to live and work here. But I'm not fascinated by the design of, or the layout of the project. I look at this area. Milford is what I consider a minor street. I don't know the right terminology for it. And Central is going to be a fairly fairly heavily trafficked street, I believe, in the future. Orange, all the times I go north, not much of that traffic is going up on Orange to Milford, whatever. Lexington, to me, is the big drive street. There's fairly high office buildings to the east, to the north, and will eventually be to the west, though I imagined it may be residential. To the south is the Lex. So looking at all those, and then looking at the design, I could not get my arms around the fact that you could have 8-story buildings with a plaza down 8 stories. If you're standing down there, you're looking up 8 stories. I just don't have a comfort zone with that. So on my laying out an alternate design, if you look at a elongated C, letter C in a cat, laying sideways on Milford, and combining all the open space principally into one location to create an acre of plaza, I think there's potential there to create a central park area, if you want to call it that, where Center Theater, that's a block or two away, could put on plays. You could show movies. You could have any kind of productions in this area without the building sitting right on top of you. It'd be kind of like a shell. You'd be running up on Central, over on Milford, and down on Nogales. The way I pictured it, the corner of Milford and Orange would be a curve where you could put a water feature where it's now street. And on the west side, at Milford and Central, where you put the curve, you can better align Milford Street from the west going past Central. So you could wrap it around better, and you could put another water feature there. I think there's ways to configure down on Lexington. That's where I'd like to have the widest open area going into this central area where you could do public events. We have Central Park, yeah, but we have busy Colorado right next to it. Hasn't been master planned yet. The Americana has open space, but it's not conducive to outdoor events where you could have an orchestra or plays or other community events. This site has potential if it is architecturally designed in the right way. You won't be swallowed up by an 8-story building, which I would put on Milford up there, and stepping down as it comes down towards Lexington. Still do all the rooftop parkland area, which I think needs to be done in everything we build nowadays. But I'm trying to combine all these little pieces of open space into one big space, an acre of open space, and I don't know how to design it yet. I don't know how. Architects have to tell me that. Grass or whatever could be elevated so you have steps leading up to a stage or whatever. And the kids that live there could go down and they'd have a bigger open space to play without having to worry about cars coming down the middle or without anything coming down Milford, or for the kids to go out. If I'm a parent, I don't want to say, okay, do they go to the west, to the east, to the north, the south? I want to principally know one direction, and that, I think, should be to the south. I think people from the Lex would walk up there. They're not going to have that kind of facility. Remember, this is not a residential area per se. When we did the downtown specific plan, I think we gave the option to go to 12 stories because I'm thinking, well, that is the financial core, it's the high-rise core, so okay. But during that analysis, I did not break down every single block to what could happen. Principally, I think even 8 stories is too high, but if If it has to be because of the economics driving the engine, I'd like to put it where it's least obtrusive and better helps the people that would frequent the open space below. It's a long-winded conversation of a design concept in my head, but I'll support the stage one because I like the concept and urge the architect and the team to work together and see if maybe there is a better design than what we see. This is stage one. So, as Mr. Quintero said, it's something we planned on, and this is unique to Glendale. And if you don't put it here, where do you plan to put it? Okay? So I'm okay with it for stage one, concept. Anybody else have any questions, or do you want to make a motion? Mrs. Snoddy.
For city attorney. City attorney, my office. Thank you, Mr. City Attorney. My office is located 200 feet from this project.
200 feet?
Yeah, it's Milford and Brand.
Okay.
However, I have no relationship with the developer. My landlord is different from the landlord of the space in question. Is there anything?
Well, the general rule is for property that you have a leasehold interest in that's within 500 feet, it's actually presumed to be material, which could create a conflict unless, and there's some factors in the FPPC guidelines which say if it's not going to impact those. And so I don't know if you have do you have a term lease or a month to month?
A term lease.
Then so it would apply, but the question then would be would the project affect the term of your lease, the amount of rent that you pay, the use and enjoyment of the property that you lease? And so generally the answer to those questions are no, because those are all tied in already. The only factor in that test that gives me a little bit of cause for concern is whether or not it affects your right to the amount that you might be able to sublease your lease property for. So if you don't have the right to sublease, and my opinion is that it wouldn't, but I have to advise you that I can't definitively say that's not the case. That it wouldn't affect your right to sublease the property, given the size and scope of the project. So that's either a determination you'd have to make after.
It doesn't impact my right to sublease. I mean, the sublease, I'm not forbidden from subleasing, but it's pending the approval of the landlord. Just
right.
Like
the question for the conflict analysis is whether or not it increases or decreases the value of those sublease rights. So
what's the answer then?
I guess always exercising caution without knowing what impact it would be, unless you had some real estate professional look at it. Maybe if it becomes an issue later on down the road, we look at it and determine whether or not it would impact the value of your sublease rights. You might want to recuse yourself. And the only reason I say is I can't definitively say that you don't have, that it wouldn't impact those. If I could, then I would say you wouldn't have, and only the FPPC can make those determinations. So that's, I always have to advise a little bit of caution there when there's one of those factors that isn't necessarily answered in the negative. Clearly, the other factors, I think, obviously, it wouldn't impact those. Again, and I don't believe it would impact the value of sublease rights, but I'm not a real estate professional, so I can't opine on that.
So your recommendation would be out of overabundance of caution, I should recuse myself?
Unless you feel, unless you feel comfortable that you know the answer to that last question.
I don't want FPPC coming after me. I mean, that's for sure.
And it's always a personal call.
Does Mr. Najarian have a similar issue?
I do have a similar issue. I have participated in some of these decisions before within the 500 feet. If I remember, my lease has a provision that in the event I sublease, any of my subleases change, and there's additional rent owed to me, the primary lessee, that the landlord has the right to recapture that.
So you don't see a net increase or decrease?
In which case it would not be a net increase.
Okay. Then that seems like a different factor to me. So I do apologize. I didn't know this was until it was just brought to my attention. So
he is or isn't?
just based on what he's explained to me, it doesn't appear that it is, because he doesn't see appreciation or depreciation in his sublease value of his sublease rights. And I do apologize. We can have these discussions in future projects that are close by.
If I recuse myself from stage 1, I guess the issue is still pending as to whether I need to recuse myself from.
Correct. And then
process.
when it comes back for stage 2, we can do a deeper analysis of
And
what
then you would handle that?
We would work with you, and then if it wasn't clear, then my suggestion would be to get an FPPC opinion. But usually with this type of situation, we can get some definitiveness, and we've done that in the past. I always have to advise each of you that it's ultimately the FPPC's decision, and my opinion is just that, an opinion. So, sorry, if you are going to recuse yourself, the FPPC rules require that you step out of the room until council's deliberated.
I intend to do so.
Okay.
So I'm going to recuse myself based on the advice of the city attorney. Step out of the room.
For stage 1.
Stage 1.
See you in closed session. Mr. Najario.
Well, since I'm in it,
Can I not even listen in?
To step down from the dais.
Step down for the
We don't want to
dais?
take any chances in you saying anything.
Thank you.
Mr. Najarian?
Thank you. And just to reiterate, my office is located at 500 North Central. I am immediately adjacent to this proposed project. And although that may have caused some analysis as to my conflict, the upside is I don't think there's anyone more familiar with this location than I am. I've been at this office for over 10 years. I do welcome Mr. Rahim Amidi and the Amidi Group back to Glendale to continue their good work. They have done great work at the Hollywood Production Centers as well as 1010 Wilshire. They've got a great business model that has been an incubator for many of our well-known national companies. But I do have some concerns on this site, and let me just go through them.
So you're not going to recuse yourself?
No, I'm not recusing.
Okay.
I'm participating. As I see it, and as I read it, the proposed plans are substandard in the number of parking spaces that they propose. They would be coming back to us with a parking variance request, which I'm not in favor of. They are also substandard in the size of the live-work units, which I'm opposed to. I don't think we need smaller units in any of our projects here. Although there's a certain amount of accumulated space which is not built on, I don't see this type of space as the open space that our planners and our planning commission envisioned and city council envisioned when we talked about giving variances and bonuses for open space. Somewhat echoing the remarks of Mayor Weaver. It's very much maze-like to get into the center part of this project, and I'm not sure how inviting it's going to be to anyone in there. This is primarily an office and a business location. There is probably, as I understand, some retail components, but I think that's going to be secondary. So I don't see a lot of people coming through here. And the way that the open space is configured, it's mainly passageways to get to the buildings that are inside. At the corner of Milford and Lexington is a fortified, 3-story high, probably 1.5-story deep, concrete, a reinforced, seismically reinforced concrete structure, which serves as parking. I think it's going to be a heck of a task for us to permit that to be demolished, both in terms of the impacts that it's going to have on the environment, as well as the loss of parking that is going to ensue from demolishing that. And couple that with the request for the future proposed request for parking variance, I don't see that as a viable alternative. I think there are too many units in this project. 535 units are just way too high. I would like to see it with a lot less number of units. I'd like to see it with a more consolidated open space. I'd like to see it less built out to the edges. I do not like the poured concrete texture and surfaces which have been proposed for the external facade of the building. And all those additional people cause a problem. Is Jess Duran here? No. From Parks. Rodney Kahn is here. Rodney, please come forward. Now, Rodney, I want you to take your consultant hat off, and you're a member of our Parks Commission, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay, that's what I want you to think of now.
Okay.
It's fair to say we have a park deficit in Glendale, don't we?
That's fair to say.
And is it also fair to say that adding 535 units would aggravate that problem?
If they were apartment units, I would say yes. But they're not apartment units. They're live-work units. And there's a completely different context and use of park facilities, as you know that, Mr. Najarian, because the commercial parking usage is very different than residential parking usage.
I'm sorry, I'm talking about parks, not parking spaces.
No,
Parks.
I'm talking about parking use. So park use.
You're talking about parking or parks?
Park. If I said parking, I missed
You said parking. You threw
Mark.
me there.
Yeah.
I see any addition to the number of units and residents in downtown Glendale as an obvious and logical increase in the demand for parks, Mr. Kahn. And you know as well as I do that any park impact fee that we have is not sufficient to meet the analysis which was done, and I think you were on the Parks Commission when that was, to add additional parks. So I'm sorry, I must disagree with you, and I disagree with you on the fact that adding additional units to the downtown area in Glendale is going to add to the demand for parks, which are already at a deficit mode. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kahn. Let's see. Steve Zern's not here. Rubik's not here. Jono Bagdanian, please come up. Hi, Jono.
Hi.
We go back a long ways, don't we?
Yes, we do, sir.
And I want to tell you what I told Rubik last week when he came before us. Nothing I say is meant to be any terms of a personal attack. But when we were on the Parking Commission and also on City Council, the Transportation Commission, City Council, looking at some of the traffic flows in the downtown area, we identified a problem at the Milford and Central intersection, didn't we?
Yes.
Okay, and the problem is it's a dogleg, is that cars either attempting to go straight or turn left are conflicted and it's not clear as to who has the right-of-way.
Yes.
And wouldn't it be a good idea to align Milford at this time when the lot is essentially being scraped and align the west side of Milford with the east side? That'd be a pretty good idea, wouldn't it?
Yes, it can be aligned. We have a number of these offset intersections throughout the city, so there is a potential for that alignment in conjunction with looking at the projects that you're looking at and see if it's a practical solution and to what extent it's going to impact the site that you're trying to accommodate a project of this caliber. And so those left turn locking that occurs, those volumes are not very heavy as they're going through, but it does create a conflict because there are offset intersections. So something can be looked at, certainly, as part of the comments that were made by council, and see how that can be accommodated or possibly corrected.
And it's proposed that one point of ingress and egress is off Milford for this particular thing. So it would be fair to say that the traffic in that intersection of Milford and Central would increase over what we currently have.
Yes, Councilmember Najarian. We will be analyzing all the intersections around the project as part of the traffic impact analysis. including the driveways on Lexington and Milford and Central and Brand intersections all the way. I've met with the staff, and there's about 15 intersections that will be analyzed if the project goes forward as part of the traffic impact analysis.
Now, I want you to take your traffic consultant hat off. I'm going to send you back in time to about 2 years ago when you were our transportation director and did so admirably. If you were to advise a council as to whether it would be a good idea or a bad idea to try to align Milford at that location, would you not tell us that it would be a good idea to try to align Milford without regard to what it might do to the property?
Certainly, any time you can correct an offset intersection, that's from a traffic engineering standpoint, that's ideal.
Thank you.
No question about that. Over all these years, there have been many projects where you
Keep
try
your
to make
transportation director hat on. I don't want you to go to the dark side. Come back. Come back to the light.
I'm advising you that in the past, wherever we've looked at these projects where you can make a correction in the alignment of the street, correct an offset, you have to do that in conjunction with the type of projects that you're doing to see how it will impact the site. We've had many examples, Colorado and Glendale Avenue, good example. If you were to correct that curve, that property, if it ever develops at the northwest corner, it will be wiped out.
Okay.
So those are the type of considerations to be given if you were to do something like that.
Thank you, Mr. Begdanian. And Raheem, you picked the best traffic consultant in the business. Is there anyone from the Planning Commission here? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding, Greg. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I'll be happy to.
I'm kidding, Greg. Let me wind up my discussions. Let me conclude.
Yeah.
Conclude. I do think that there's a place in our downtown for this type of development. I do believe that this project can be better designed, giving us greater open space collectively, giving us fewer units total, and adjusting some of the streets and the traffic flow around. And I would, my problem in voting to approve the Stage 1 is, as everyone knows, it's very much a fait accompli once a Stage 1 is developed and approved for the next stage. So my thoughts are that, and I hope that that the end result, whether it's adjusted at this point or at the Stage 2 portion, is that we see a better thought-out design which would accomplish those goals that I just mentioned. Thank you, Mr.
Okay, Mr. Weaver, there are numerous points that I disagree with Ms. Najarian about, but let's not prolong it. I would like to make the motion.
Wait up. We haven't heard from the young lady over here.
Oh, excuse
Oh,
me.
you forgot. It's been so long with him that you forgot. Friedman.
I have two questions for the applicant first. The first is there going to be a public art component, or are you paying into the art fund? And the second question is, I wanted you to talk about the parking variance, what it is, why it is. Maybe you can explain that a little bit.
To answer the first question, Councilmember Friedman, we will be paying the in lieu fee as it relates to the arts fee. The second piece, I'd really like to have our traffic engineer talk about parking. But before I defer that question to him, I do want to speak a little bit to it. In terms of the parking analysis that takes place, and there was a few things that were brought up, and I won't take much time at all. One related to the parking spaces and what's being proposed. We are proposing 904 on-site parking spaces. If this were a standard apartment-type project, the code would require us to provide 750 spaces. So we're providing 154 more spaces than what would typically be required for an apartment project. And as I mentioned, we're not an apartment project. We're a live-work project. The second thing is earlier in the presentation, we talked about the other types of transit or transportation methods that we're providing, whether it's a shuttle service, whether it's shared car parking, or whether it's shared bicycles, short-term, long-term bicycle parking. Those are the types of things that we've incorporated. But what I'd like to do is ask Jono to come back up and specifically address your question as it relates to the quantity.
I think you addressed it to my satisfaction for now. We're going to be hearing more about parking because you're going to have to do an EIR to talk about parking, and I think that's really the best place to address that. It does impact your design, but we need to really know about that. I think the EIR is going to give us more information, but I did want the public to understand that you're providing more parking spaces than an apartment building would require. And perhaps next time you can talk about the type of tenants you have, what your experience is in 1010, your other live-work building, and how many spaces you're finding that those tenants are needing.
Councilmember Friedman will absolutely do that. There's a traffic analysis, there's a parking analysis that's part of the environmental document, and not only we will be referring to 1010, but other organizations such as the American Planning Association and some of the other more technical associations will be looking at their parking suggestions and requirements for live work as well.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So my comments are that this is a very different kind of project than we've seen in the past. I want the public to understand this is not a traditional apartment building. Will these be furnished, or are you still deciding that? So these are fully furnished. When people move into these, they have their phone set up, their internet, everything that they need to basically operate a business and to live. They have a very different clientele than traditional apartments. Mr. Weaver mentioned families. I don't see many families in these buildings. I don't know if you have any in your other buildings. What you get are people who maybe are either living here. I think I would suspect some of them don't have their primary residences here. They may be living in San Francisco, spending 4 days a week here, so they rent these to live during the week. They may not even have cars here. They might, I don't know. But they're working in these buildings. That's why you're renting them. That's why you're paying a premium. That's why you have the size apartment you have. That's why you don't bring your own furniture in. These are not people who are generally going to be getting in their cars and commuting to another office in the morning. They're going to be working in these spaces, and so they're not commuting anywhere. So the traffic impact, I think, is very different from a traditional apartment building. And it's also providing a kind of experience that we haven't offered in the past for people who want to work here, people who want to live here. So I think it's going to be very interesting. I do think you've gotten some good suggestions from my colleagues. I think that some of the concerns were raised are good concerns, are valid concerns, in terms of the open space, in terms of Milford, in terms of traffic, and I hope you take those very seriously and really evaluate those when you come back. I think the open space is interesting, but it's very possible that by combining some of it, you might be able to find something that is more usable. I am worried as well about whether the public will see that open space as being their open space, whether they'll even know it's there. The paseo you have is very wide and inviting, and I do think people will use that, but are they going to continue and find their way into that large central area? I don't know. I'll be interested to see your response and also our urban design team, what they think of that. I'm not unhappy with the design, but I think you've had some good suggestions, and I think there have been some good concerns raised. I mentioned to you the central and possibly putting a median in to keep people from turning left into the Citibank driveway. That's something I hope that you take a look at, that traffic takes a look at. But I am going to support the Phase 1 design. I'm interested to see the EIR later to see what the impacts are, and we'll have a chance then as a community to weigh in on that. But I do believe in general that the impacts from this building are going to be much less than a traditional apartment building, less than if it was this amount of retail. That's a much higher traffic impact. So I think that the community needs to understand that this is something that's a little bit different and potentially very exciting for our city.
Okay, with that, since we have closed session yet.
I'll move the Stage 1 design.
For a second?
Second.
Okay, with that, roll call.
Council members: Friedman,
Yes.
Najarian,
No.
Quintero,
Yes.
Onion, Mayor Weaver.
Aye. 401, I guess.
And Mr. Kosaki, Councilmember Sinani's vote should be identified as an abstain for recusal, not absent.
Okay, so architect, companies, developer have heard our comments. We'll take them under consideration. looking to the future. Thank you. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn for the city council?
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Stand adjourned at 5:15.